said, oh, okay. So I said, do you, I was told that you're a Christian. Like this. Oh, okay. See, God has like saints in Caesar's household. And they're working things to open up doors for you to go global with your business, and you don't even know it. Their divine appointments set up. You're trying to figure out, well, I sure wish I could do this or do that. Hey, your competitors are trying to figure out how to get there. I'm telling you, you do business supernaturally, and God will open the door for you with a believer on the other side of the road who wants a believer to get that job. That's why I'm not even worried about the American economy, because I'm in a global economy right now. So I go, okay. And I said, here's the convicting part. Can you tell me anything about your own experience in persecution? Things are lightening up. She goes, yeah, well, I spent 20 years in prison. At this point, there was very little comparing of persecution stories. And all my traumatic church stories are kind of like, let's not compare scars right now. So, difficult time? Yeah. Freezing in the cell of a prison in North Korea under the communists because of faith. Everyone dying, malnutrition. I said, well, how did you live? And how did you connect with the United States? She said, well, the guards bundled up 24 hours a day. They never left us alone. They watched us. Imagine that invasiveness, watching you and not liking you 24 hours a day in teams of 2. She said, so what I would do is we'd learn how to worship. And we'd be huddled in a corner. I was there and I just closed my eyes. And I would go into third heaven purely out of desperation of needing to get out of where I was. And when I was there, I heard the prayers of Christians praying for us in China, Korea, and the voices were English. So I knew that the Americans, the British, the Australians were praying, and I knew this was distinctly an American sin. So I knew my destiny was linked to this country, if I ever got out of there. I said, well, how do you handle the cold? She said, well, that's the interesting thing. It would get so warm around me when I tapped into that realm of prayer that the sweat was coming off of my nose, and the guards would have to stare at me like that because they're bundled up and all I had was this thin cloth, and I was warmer than they were. I said, well, do you have any like near-death experiences? She said, they took me out to shoot me twice. I had one last request. They wouldn't give me food. So I asked if I could sing. I said, what happened? She said, well, they blindfolded me. They had a firing squad. And my last request was to sing so they could shoot me at least worship. She said, and I sang, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. She said, as I sang, she could hear the officer hit on the anointing, start to sob, and he couldn't get his voice clear to command them to fire. So he had them march back in and try it again with her later. Twice she sang her way out of an appointment with death. I had no stories to compare with that either. I started to feel rather small for requiring the interview in my house because I had to drive to Houston. I want to make sure this is God, the man of God. So, I'll go. So off I go. And I won't tell you all the rest of the story, but I'll tell you this. When I'm there, I meet with an institute that's a 7-mountain institute that has chapters in 50 cities with leading businessmen. That they're taking this concept more to heart than we are, because they've lived with the tension of persecution, so that they know that the nation is still wet cement, and they're being very intentional the senior economist at the party, Peter Chow, professor at Beijing University, lectured at Harvard this year, told me that he believes, and he's told the party, that 30% of China will likely be followers of Jesus by 2030. Now, they have their own battle. But here's what I want to show you real quick. It starts with you over here, doing business supernaturally. DBS. If you haven't got that series at that table over there, get that one. Doing business. I had more millionaires made off of that, multi-millionaires made off of that, than any other series. Doing business supernaturally. This is when you shall be saved. You shall be saved. And your house. The second level of salvation is for you and your house. So it's going to be your house. But the curious thing about house is the word not ethnos. It's oikos. And oikos is where you get the root word for oikonomics. It's the word for economics. So oikos in economics is the derivative of that. It has to do with the household is provided for, so that your house will not starve, your house will not die, your house will not be destroyed by the plague. 1,000 fall at your right, 10,000 your left. Most of us confess that for us. Expanded a little bit, because when the Jews had the plague come to Egypt, when they were under the blood in the house, God defined the target radius as houses, not people. In fact, if you weren't in the house, you weren't covered. So salvation comes to you and your house. You look at it in the book, in the New Testament, it's you and your house. Most of us forget the and house was already included in your salvation. Make sense? In order to have nations as your inheritance, you have to have the cities. Apostle Paul, 14 out of 16 of the major cities that he went at, the places he went, were key cities that were the government capital of their area. The apostles targeted cities that housed the government. You know where the church is weakest? In our cities. You can look at the red and blue, map at election time and see that, we're spread all over the place. And you're in Missouri. We're there. We get out there. LA, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Boston, Washington. We don't have much presence. And yet those are the epicenters of culture. Communication, Los Angeles. Wealth, New York. Power, Washington. So we have to raise up a whole new generation of filmmakers and entertainment professionals linked to business people in New York, in that area, who have the funds to drive transformational projects that are done in other parts of the country. You understand what I'm saying? These are cities anyway. So you have to have your cities, but your cities is called the polis. Here, your cities, put that there. I'll just put a landscape there, a big city. Your cities is what's going to affect your nation. So how many of you know that if you get Cairo, you're going to touch Egypt? If you get Moscow, St. Petersburg, you're hitting Russia. Get Jerusalem, you touch Israel. Make sense to you? So at some point, cities are going to start to shake. But there's a step right here in the middle that's missed. And I did this wrong, because this is the missing piece right here. How many of you know that we have an idea about getting ourselves saved, getting our household saved? Remember, this is your family business. What did Mark Nuttall say? Mark Nuttall said that 70% to 80% of the U.S. economy is driven by small businesses of 20 people or less. The American economic engine, you never hear about this, is driven by entrepreneurs. By the way, 1/3 of those are faith businesses, meaning the father or the mother running it is a Christian. Because it's a peculiar thing about Christianity, it produces a work ethic with possibilities. So this here is the seven mountains. This one is what the stage, which is called the koinenos. Koinenos. It has to do with the institutions that shape culture. So this would be law, government, your science. Education is there in the science realm. It's your economics. It's your religions. Those institutions that shape culture are the areas you have to penetrate in order to impact the city. The mistake we've made is We want to change nations by creating mega church. The problem is, that big church only occupies 1/7 of the center of influence in that city. However, Christians occupy all 7. Well, they occupy as a place that they have vision, dreams, callings, and make a living. They're not occupying in terms of Antichrist, because they're not taking territory as though it's their assignment. They're just making a living there. See how the picture works? Does that make sense to you? Does that make sense to you? Check your neighbor out. Does that make sense? So if the end game is nations, and you're down here as an individual, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to ask yourself, to whom am I sent? Who has God sent me to? Where is God calling me to go? There's different phases and stages in these divine calls. And I wanted to cover so much more. What time does this end, David?